So let's start, right?
Okay, just very quickly. On my screen it says you are in a practice session. Does anybody else see that?
Yeah, everyone, because
Okay.
we're still in a practice session, and now as soon as we start the webinar, that message will disappear and we start, and people will start to come into the session.
Okay, very good.
Okay. Jim, so you need to put the English language, right?
I guess where do I click on interpretation?
Where it says interpretation, there you need to choose English.
Okay, good.
Did you see the, and then you will have all the time in English.
Okay, very good.
Okay, y yo le voy a recordar a la gente,
And I will remind everyone.
I'm going to say hello. Please, I'm going to ask people to put like what's the name, the interpretation thing, and then you're going to introduce him, and then he goes again, right?
Okay, you introduce me, Daniel, and I introduce Jim.
Yeah, and then after John, you introduce me, then I'll share my screen.
Yeah.
Hola,
Okay,
Mónica.
I'm going
Hola,
to start the
Fer.
webinar.
No la saludé.
No te preocupes, hola.
Oye, nuestra última charla. It's our last talk.
Sí, exactamente.
If we don't see each other later, have a great vacation, and we'll see
Bueno,
each other
thank you.
again in March.
Yeah, exactly. Bueno, thank you, and same for you.
Thank you.
Jim, no pressure. Our last talk.
I'm good. I live for pressure.
The last is the best. Best things for the end.
I'm going to start.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, start. Bueno, muy buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, everybody. That you are joining us in this webinar and this meeting, this space for growth, for skill development, where we are finishing a program that lasted for 5 amazing activities. We had the development of the skills of resilience, empathy, and also we talked about the importance of conflict management, and we finished with neuroscience. And now we will have technology, which is one of the topics that most of the parents asked in the last activity that we had. And to introduce and read a little bit of his amazing resume and his amazing skills, speaking skills, I would like to leave you with, before we go to John Sequest, the director of the Lincoln School. The talk will be in English, but you have a small globe icon that says, I don't know if it says language or interpretation, and you need to choose whichever is easier for you, whether it's English or Spanish. There's simultaneous interpretation, so you can follow in the best way possible the broadcasting of according to your language of preference. Now, dear John, introduce our Jim Taylor, who is going to talk about technology today. Good afternoon. Thank you, Daniel. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Before I introduce Jim, Daniel, I want to thank you. I want to take this moment to thank you right now, because we've had 5 amazing talks in this parent training program, and it's been an amazing experience. So through myself, through the Lincoln, I would like to thank you for this amazing work, and we are all waiting for the talks next year. So Daniel, a huge hug from far away, from the distance, and well, thank you very much. And also thank you for this connection. And let's not forget all the rest of the schools that are involved in this. We have the Grange School. We have many schools behind these activities that are very eager, and we will have Monica then moderating the questions, and we are very glad to help and collaborate in the training and of our and learning of our dear children using the tools that we may have available. So thank you very much, John. Everything, the microphone's yours.
Good evening, everybody. I'll introduce Dr. Jim Taylor. Dr. Jim Taylor has worked with young people, parents and teachers in education, sports, and the performing arts for more than 25 years. He also consults with business internationally about the role of technology in our professional and personal lives. He's the author of 18 books, including 5 parenting books, of which his latest is Raising Generation Tech. Prepare your children for a media-fueled world. Jim blogs on the psychology of technology and family for psychologytoday.com, huffingtonpost.com, and on his own website. Jim is a former world-ranked alpine ski racer, a second-degree black belt in karate, a marathon runner, and an Ironman triathlete. Jim lives in north of San Francisco with his wife and their daughters. And you can all learn more about him at drjimtaylor.com. It is a pleasure, Jim, to leave you with this audience. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, John. Daniel, I want to thank all of you in attendance who are willing to take the time to listen to what I have to say, to share my ideas. I also want to thank, again, all of you for giving me this opportunity to really not just to share my experiences as a psychologist and as a parent, but also my passions. And my passions are parenting, children, raising healthy children, as well as the impact of technology on all our lives. And I've been told in my research that technology is as much of a wonderful thing and a problem in Santiago in Chile as it is in the US. So hopefully my ideas will resonate with you. What I want to do now is share my PowerPoint. For those of you who are visual learners, it'll help you to follow along and maybe help the simultaneous translators as well. And by the way, I do want to thank the 2 translators, Tarek and Lillian. I've used simultaneous translation before and in previous talks, and I'm always amazed at the skill and how they do it, that they can listen and translate and speak seconds later. Any case, the name of my presentation today is Raising Generation Tech. Prepare your children for a media fuel world. And it's based on the book, as you see on the cover right there. And this is an issue that is, over the last 10 years, has become perhaps the most important area and the greatest concern for parents, because technology has taken over all of our lives. So let's begin. I'd like to introduce my thoughts with 2 worries: a confession, an admission, an emotion, and an attitude. The 2 worries are 1, Zoom workshops are always difficult because usually if I'm in person, I can look into your eyes, I can see your facial expressions, and we can connect. Zoom, it's not as easy, certainly, at least not until the question and answer period. The second is that my concern is that my words, and especially my jokes, will not translate well into Spanish. So we'll see how that goes. But all I can do is the best I can, and we will see. Daniel did say that you've had some amazing speakers before, and that he says that puts a lot of pressure on me. But I thrive on pressure, so I will do the very best I can to live up to the standards of the previous speakers. My confession is this: I wrote my first parenting book before I had children. And is this a great world we live in, that I can be an expert in something I've never actually done before? But now, yes, I do have 2 daughters. They're 16 and 14. They're teenagers. And so in talking to you, I speak to you as a parenting expert. And I put air quotes for parenting expert because I've learned that it's easy to be an expert for other children's parents, for other parents' children. It's a lot more difficult to be an expert for your own children. And so as far as the admission goes, that as a parent, I struggle with the challenges of parenting just like everybody else. My children, my daughters, don't care whether I've written 5 books on parenting. They just want me to be the best parent I can be. And so, so that is always a challenge. The emotion I feel is empathy, that I'm not here to tell you what to do and be able to say, you need to do all these things to be a great parent. I empathize because, yes, I know a lot about parenting from my professional life, but I also know the challenges, the pain, the frustrations, the joy, the excitement, the pride of being a parent every day with my daughters. And the attitude I want to leave you with before I move on is one of we're all trying to just do our best, and that we don't have to be perfect parents. All we need to do is be the best parents we can be, and love our children and communicate positive messages to our children as much as we can. So also relatedly, we're all in this together. We're just trying to do the best we can for our children in a world that's more challenging, I think, than when we grew up. So with all that said, let's dive in to technology and children and families. So 5 things I believe about technology. First, technology is one of the 3 most powerful forces in children's lives today. The other 2 are popular culture, and the third is us. And we don't want to forget that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But technology, because it's ever present, it's in children's lives constantly, except when they sleep, if they can sleep, because they're sleeping with their phone next to their bed. It's almost inescapable. And I don't want you to get the impression that I believe technology is evil or bad. Technology is neither good nor bad. It's how it's used that matters. So it's neutral. It can be used as a wonderful tool or as a real weapon against our children, against our families, and against our worlds, as we all know from watching the news and reading the newspaper. One thing that is very clear. So I am not saying that we shouldn't have technology, that we should take it all away. That's not going to happen. There's an expression in the US that the train has already left the station. And meaning it's not going back. We're not going back before they had the internet, before we had smartphones. So it's not a matter of use. I have no problem with children, with parents, with families using technology. What the research is showing more and more is that too early, too much, and unguided exposure to media will hurt children. It will not prepare them for successful and happy lives. Whoops. And so here's an interesting twist. The way to raise good kids hasn't really changed that much since when we were children. Yes, the technology has made it harder, but the same kind of things that we were raised with to raise good kids, to hopefully be raised to be good people, same sort of things. Now it is harder now because when we were children, most of the messages we got from our parents, from our culture, from our neighborhoods, from our schools, all were mostly positive and supportive of helping us to become good human beings. Unfortunately now, many of the forces outside of our family are not healthy. Popular culture, social media, so much that kids hear about of the world is not healthy for them. So we as parents, we need to work that much harder. And I will say it's also extremely tiring. And ultimately, we want our children and ourselves to learn to use technology to make our lives better, not to be used by technology. And one of the scary things now, these days, is that a lot of technology, especially with social media, is that it's designed to control us. When I say control us, I mean, there's something called persuasive technology. And you might have read about it. It's where the big tech companies are spending billions of dollars a year to figure out ways to get children and adults to think certain ways, to feel certain emotions, and to behave certain ways, all for the purpose of making money, not considering what is best for us, but simply to make money. So all the things like likes, like dislikes, like thumbs up, thumbs downs, loves, number of hits, all of these were designed to help to engage people, to get them to spend more time on their phones, and also to click on ads and to buy things, because that's where the money is. And I will say that though technology is neither good nor bad, very often the people behind the technology, the companies, again, they're not good nor bad, but their purpose is to make money. And these companies, Snapchat, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, all of them, they don't care about our children. They care about making money. So it's really important to be aware of that everything that is in that smartphone, for example, is designed for that purpose, not to help our children become healthy and happier. Here's a quote. Children today love luxury too much. They have terrible manners, flaunt authority, have no respect for their elders. They no longer rise when their parents or teachers enter the room. What kind of awful creatures will they become when they grow up? Now, you might think that someone said that maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but do you know when it was said? 400 BC, thousands of years ago, by Socrates. So what that suggests to me is that the challenges that we face are not that different from previous generations and previous eras of raising children. Like I said, though, it's gotten harder because of this technology. So what I'd like to do now is talk about some of the research on how much we're using technology, how much children and families are using technology. And my statistics come from the Kaiser Foundation here in California that has produced some wonderful research on some studies on how much we use technology. So let's look at this. Media use. How many hours per day do families spend in front of a screen? And I'm going to give you these statistics, but I also want you to think about your own family, because I can't judge. Maybe you don't have smartphones in your house or computers. I would say it's very unlikely. Otherwise, actually, it's very unlikely because you couldn't be watching this unless, of course, you had technology. But think about how much time is spent in front of a screen. What the research has shown is that for children under 8, kids spend about 2 hours and 20 minutes a day. For kids 8 to 12, about 6 hours a day. Now, here's the truly shocking statistic that when this research first came out, the researchers said there had to be a mistake. They went back and looked at the data and retested it to ensure that they were correct, because the number was so high. So what this research found was that children between the ages of 13 and 18, they spend 9 hours a day on recreational media. I don't mean school screens. I don't mean using computers for their classes. I mean simply recreational media, social media, games, and so on. So if you do the math, that's 114 days a year. That's about a third of the year spent in front of a screen. Now, from that perspective, that is really scary. Now, though, parents, they found that parents spend 7 hours and 45 minutes on average in front of a recreational screen, not work-related. 50% of teens say they're addicted to their phones. You know, I've actually asked this question of many kids when I speak to kids about this, and it's way more than 50%. It's probably more like 80 or 90% who say they're addicted. And also, when I talk about addiction, I don't just mean psychological addiction. There's been some really scary research that has shown that people, not just kids, but people, when they become neurophysiologically addicted to their screens and their phones, just like gambling, drugs, and alcohol. So it's not just a matter of getting kids to make good choices around their technology. They can't, because they are literally physiologically addicted to their technology. So Jean Twenge, she's a very well-known researcher of technology in the United States. And she wrote an article a few years ago that said that we are losing an entire generation of kids to technology. Alexandra Samuel is a journalist who writes a lot on technology, and she provided a counter argument to Jean Twenge. She said, we're not losing a generation of kids, we're losing a generation of parents. That's the parents of the problem, and that they're the ones causing the children to have the problems. Because I don't know if this happened in Santiago in Chile, but there was research that has found in the last 10 years, there's been a significant increase in the number of childhood accidents. as measured by visits to the emergency room. And though they couldn't say definitively, the researchers believed that the reason why this has been this increase in childhood accidents is because parents are not paying attention to their children. So at the playgrounds, in the US, if you go to a playground with young kids and their parents, what are the parents doing? They're staring at their phones instead of watching their kids and making sure they're safe. So what I would argue is that yes to both Jean Twenge and Alexandra Samuel, that we're losing a generation of kids and parents to this powerful influence on our lives. Very little small side note, but it's a point of reference. Texting. The research has shown that boys on average text about 110 times a day. Now here's scary. Girls about 135 texts a day. And they found one girl, a teenager, who texted up to 2,000 times a day. That's almost inconceivable that she would have that much time in the day to do that. So another bit of research found that kids are tech savvy, but they're not tech skilled. Let me make this distinction for you. Tech savvy means they know how to use their smartphones, they know how to navigate the internet, they know how to sign into apps and things like that. That's tech savvy. But tech skilled, it means that they actually know how to use technology for their education to better their lives. And so here's a cartoon that I found that I love. It's very important that you try very, very hard to remember where you electronically transferred mommy and daddy's assets. I'm hoping that translates into Spanish because I think it's pretty funny. So your goal in raising your children, and I'm using a metaphor here of 3.0, 2.0, 1.0, just like software. So if you think about computer software, 1.0 means it's new, it hasn't been fully tested, it has like a lot of glitches. And when you first have children as babies, there are a lot of glitches. They can't talk to you, they poop a lot, they cry a lot, they keep you awake. And then they get a little older and they get to be version 2.0. And they can talk more, they can communicate better, they can start to take care of themselves a little bit. But still, there's still a lot of glitches in their programs. What I'm suggesting we aim for is kids 3.0, and this is the latest version. And let me describe what I mean by that. The first step in raising kids 3.0 is to protect and prepare them. And I mentioned both words together because you need to have them both. Because you can't just protect them, because sooner or later, they're going to go out into the real world and they're going to be exposed to technology. So, but at first you want to protect them, and then you want to prepare them for that world out there. So one of the scary statistics these days is something like 70% of kids in the US, infants, children, babies, have their parents put screens in front of them when they're less than 1 year old. So you'll see kids out in the streets with their parents on tablets or phones. That's way too early to be on screens, because the research shows is that kids do not process screens and information from a screen the same way they do real people. So it's really important to not start your kids on screens that early. And I was told by Daniel that that those of you in the audience come from a wide range. So some of you have very young children, and some of you have sort of tweeners in the middle, and some of you have high school teenagers. So some of these things will apply, some of these won't. And as I touched on earlier, what you really want to do before anything in raising kids 3.0 is just focus on raising good kids. And as I said before, that hasn't changed from our generation or generations before. The way you raise healthy, happy, successful kids is to instill in them really good values, healthy attitudes, and good skills that will prepare them for the real world. Very importantly, and this is where parents struggle, is to model a healthy relationship with media. Because if parents are addicted to technology, if they're spending time in front of their screens, then their kids are going to see that, and they're going to think that that's what a healthy relationship with technology is. And one thing that I see in the US so often, I'm out at a restaurant with my family, and there'll be another family next to us at another table, and they'll all be on their phones. Or here's an even worse one. Two parents with two very young children. And the parents are having a wonderful time talking, enjoying the glass of wine, while their kids have headphones on, staring at screens. These are not practices that are healthy for children's development. So it's really important that we as parents, we look at ourselves in the mirror and consider what is our relationship with technology, and is it healthy? Because in all likelihood, whatever relationship we have, that's the relationship our children will have. Very importantly, we must set limits on our children. Again, they are addicted to technology. They are incapable largely of setting their own limits. It is so attractive. The buzzes, the beeps, the chirps, you can't resist. But as your kids get older, you can't just tell them, teenagers, you can't just say no phones or only phones during these hours. You need to then engage them in a conversation. Talk to them about technology, about its effects on them. See how they feel about technology. Because a lot of kids don't want to be addicted to their technology. They don't want to be constantly on their phones, but they can't help it. So that guidance is so important as your kids get older. And a part of that is educating them about the impact of technology. So they always hear from us old folks that technology is bad. But they often just think, oh, that's my parents, they're old school, they don't understand. But if you can show them the research and give them things they can read and watch that help them to understand. For example, I'm going to guess that the documentary Social Dilemma is available in Spanish. And if you speak English, then you can get it in English. Really, really powerful. Called Social Dilemma. You can get it on Netflix, on Amazon, a lot of different places. And they might have actually already shown it in your schools. Really powerful for kids to watch. Last point about raising kids 3.0 is don't be expedient. The word expedient is one of the most dangerous words in parenting, because what expedient means is doing what's easiest for us as parents. And it's just easier to just let your kids have their phones and do whatever they want. But expediency and healthy children don't play nice together. They don't work together. Because when we signed on as parents, they didn't tell us how hard it was going to be. They just said it's all wonderful and we have beautiful children and so on. As you well know, parenting at every stage of raising kids is very difficult, and it's tiring and it's stressful, and you want to do other things. But the reality is there are children, we can't return them, and we want to do what's best for them. So it's so important to remind yourself, even when you're tired, even when you don't want to, even when you have work to do, always go back to this question: what is in the best interest of my children? Now, that doesn't mean you can't take an evening off or have a glass of wine or get exercise or read a book, because you have to take care of yourself. Unhappy parents create unhappy children. So you do need to take care of yourself. But if you continue to do what's easiest for you, then that is ultimately going to hurt your children. So kids 3.0 are kids who are healthy, happy, and successful. The power of parents. So often these days, the messages that parents get is that as your kids get older, you start to let them go. And by high school years, they're on their own. That is a very dangerous thing to do. If you let go of your children, if you don't provide them with guidance and connection, they're going to seek guidance and connection from the outside world. That's to say, technology, social media, peers, popular culture. And technology, social media, video games, popular culture, they don't care about your children. So you want to make sure that you continue to exert your power over them. And let me describe some ways you can do that. Ultimately, you decide on your family's relationship with media. You choose why, when, where, and how your children use media. You can say, well, I let them do what they want. You are making that choice. And so if they're spending too much time on their screens, that is, you have the power to change that. Now, yes, as I said, it's tiring, it's hard, you're going to battle with your kids, but that's part of the job. We need to fight for our kids. And sometimes that means fighting with our kids. 3 questions I want you to ask yourselves about your relationship, your family's relationship with media. How much time, and I guess I already asked this before, how much time do you and your children devote to media? And you don't even have to put it in terms of hours because it's hard to judge, but just looking around your house on weekends, nights, what are you doing? And what specifically are you doing on your technology? What limits and guidance on media do you provide your children? Are you actively engaged in their relationship with technology? And lastly, and this is a really painful one for me, what could your family do if you spent less time with media? And there's an expression that comes from economics called opportunity costs. And opportunity costs is basically applied here, that time spent on technology is time not spent doing other things that might be more healthy, whether sleeping, doing schoolwork, spending time with family and friends, eating well. And there's been research that has shown that typically when kids are on their technology, they tend to eat unhealthily. So this is my challenge to you. Answer these questions and see if you are comfortable with the answers. Be the parent. Here's another cartoon. Can't you keep your parenting to yourselves? Says the girl. No, people, no. We have to not keep our parenting to ourselves. We need to parent our children. That's the job, and it's so important if we want to have the kind of kids that grow up to be kids 3.0. And I totally appreciate that as your kids get older, they're not going to want to hear it from you. And there's an old expression in the US, talk to the hand. I think that's sort of very passe and not around anymore. But that's the attitude they give up. It's like the new one is the rolling the eyes. You try to say something to them, they go like this. Because it's like, oh, you know, I don't need to hear that from you. But even when they say they're not listening, they're listening. So it's really important to make sure that you stay as their parent and don't just let them go free. Now I want to talk about 3 areas that I think technology has the most harmful impact on our children. The first is self-identity. Now, here's a quote from a father changing his son's Facebook status. To all of Chris's friends, this is his father. My son carelessly left his account logged in, so I decided to snoop around. Upon reading my son's personal information, I would like to clear a few things up. My son is not a gangsta. He will not beat a hoe's ass. I'm sorry for the translators on that one, it's a little crass. And he will most certainly not roll a fatty with his boys. I hope you find this funny in Spanish. So for all of those who think he is some hard-ass thug, think again. He is Chris, a 15-year-old kid that was afraid of the dark until he was 12 and cried at the end of Marley and Me. So the idea here is that this boy, Chris, is presenting an identity that's very different than the one that's actually his. So let's explore this a little bit. Why is self-identity so important? Well, first of all, self-identity is how children come to perceive and value themselves. Who are they? How would they describe themselves? And this is an important part of the developmental process to become functioning adults. In past generations, most self-identity was developed through first self-observation. So children would watch them, would be aware of themselves as they are in school, with their friends, in sports and other activities, and with their family, and observe themselves and say, and then be able to say, oh, so that's how I am. This is who I am. And also through social reflection. So by watching other people in their lives, parents, teachers, friends, they get messages back from us of the kind of person they are. So by watching, so they'll get feedback for saying, from parents saying, oh, you're generous, you're kind, you're stubborn, you're studious. And they come to internalize these observations, and it becomes who they are. And so self-identity is so important because it acts as the foundation of who children become, and in who they become, that is what they end up doing in their lives. Unfortunately, what's happened with social media in particular is what's called the externalization of self-identity. So self-identity now is being manufactured from the outside because of the internet, because of the constant connection, because of social media. Children are looking outside at technology, popular culture, their peers, social media to decide who they should be. Because an unfortunate thing that's happened is now popular culture is using technology to shape the self-identity of children by tapping into some basic needs: feeling good about themselves, being accepted, and being popular. And children are very vulnerable, especially teenagers are very vulnerable, because so much of being a teenager and adolescence is, it doesn't feel very good. You're still trying to figure out the world. There's a lot of struggles going on. And so if you can get it, if you can get a sense like from something like social media that this is the way I should be, that makes it a lot easier, but it's not the healthiest. So what's happened with social media, and there's been some really scary research about here as well, is that instead of children expressing who they are on their social media, they're actually promoting themselves. They're figuring out, they're asking this question: how can I ensure that others view me positively? So they're finding that the vast majority of information put on social media is overly positive. The photos, the images that are posted on social media are almost always happy, because people on social media are probably going to be less likely to be interested in following somebody who's a downer, somebody who's always unhappy. The problem is that there can be this blurred line, or this crossing of lines between real self and manufactured self, and the person and the persona. And the farther children get away from who they really are, what's called their authentic self, the more they're going to struggle. And what happens is, well, I'll save that point for later on. So what can you help do with children with respect to self-identity related to Kids 3.0? First of all, constantly reflect back who your children are. Gosh, you're really kind and generous for helping clear the table. You were really thoughtful to think of your friend's birthday. So constantly sending that social reflection message about who they are. So when they look in the mirror, they don't see this manufactured person from social media. They see who they are and what they can, and the healthy possibilities of what they can be. Ground your children in reality. So many kids these days, their goal in life is to be a social media influencer, because they see on social media these young people making millions, sometimes millions of dollars. And so they can be that way. So they start putting things on their social media. And unfortunately with social media, most of the social media influencers are not doing anything of value. They're doing things that are trivial. They're doing things that are stupid. But ultimately what they're doing are things that are entertaining. And that's what kids are drawn to. And that's not the real world. So ground your kids in chores, in school responsibilities, in family responsibilities. Make sure that the messages you send them about their world is accurate, and again, grounded in reality, not the messages they're getting from social media. So important. Have your children involved in healthy activities. This is one of the most powerful antidotes to the harm that technology can do to children. If your children are engaged in healthy activities, and I don't care whether it's activities related to your faith, sports, music, dance, chess, school, I don't care what it is. If they're deeply engaged, if they're passionate about these activities, or if their time is taken up with these activities, that's time and energy not being taken up by the unhealthy messages given through technology and social media. The second incredibly powerful antidote for social media technology is to surround your children with healthy values, with healthy people. People who have the same values as you, who have the same goals as you. Because if they're surrounded by healthy people, they're getting messages, again, going back to that social reflection, they're getting messages that are healthy. And those healthy messages, not just from you, not just from your family, but from friends, extended family, neighborhood, school community, religious community, other activity community, those messages can drown out some of the messages that your kids are getting from technology and social media. A quote from the writer Christina Rosen: "Does this technology, with its constant demands to collect friends and status and perform by marketing yourself, in some ways undermine our ability to attain what it promises, a surer sense of who we are and where we belong. And there's been some more research that's found that children who spend too much time on social media are insecure, are depressed, and are anxious. And yes, they can't be sure that social media is causing it, but it certainly is a strong indication that social media and technology is contributing to it. Now let's talk about the second area that I see most harmful, and that's attention or focus in a media-fueled world. From an American boy named Vishnal, who's 17 years old. I'm doing Facebook, YouTube, having a conversation or two with a friend, listening to music at the same time. I'm doing a million things at once, like a lot of people my age. Sometimes I'll say, I need to stop this and do my homework, but I can't. Why? Because Vishnal is addicted, and he doesn't want to lose out. You've probably heard the expression FOMO, fear of missing out. And if kids aren't on their social media, on their technology, they might miss out on something really important. And kids, teenagers are very social creatures, so that's a very important thing to them. So what's preventing your children from focusing? Focus is so important for a simple reason. It's the gateway to all thinking. Kids can't perceive, remember, use language, learn, be creative, reason, problem solve, or make decisions without the ability to focus. So it's absolutely essential to every aspect of children's cognitive functioning. I want to use a metaphor here. Being on the internet, social media, games, it's like jet skiing. You're skimming across the surface, going really fast. There's no time to look around, except all you can do is look ahead. It's very exhilarating. It's very stimulating. That's why kids like it. But there's no time to stop and think or reflect. Let's compare that to scuba diving. And the example might be reading. You're going deep into the book. Underwater, there aren't a lot of external distractions. It's not fast. It's actually very slow moving. So there's time to ponder, to reflect, to consider, to think, to analyze. And so which is better? They're both very interesting, but too much jet skiing limits the ability to think in any kind of deep and meaningful way. So what is children's greatest obstacle to effective focus? And let's think about school here, which is obviously very important. What's that greatest obstacle? Multitasking. Now, if I was in person with you, I would ask how many of you multitask, or how many of you are really good multitaskers? And a lot of people would raise their hand, and I'll say, no, you're not. And I'll ask how many of you multitask. Everybody would raise their hand and go, no, you don't. Multitasking is a lie. Yes, we can multitask, for example, by walking and talking, two different activities that don't involve the same brain functions. But for example, studying, we cannot focus on two things at once. We cannot look at our screens and our book in school. What we're really engaging in is serial single tasking. So when we think we're focusing on the same thing at once, what we're actually doing is going from one, focusing here to there, to there, to there, to there. Now, people think that, okay, let's call it serial single tasking. I can still do that because I can easily switch from here, my attention on let's say a book, to my screen here, to a TV, to my music. But research has shown that in that movement from focusing here to there, there's actually a significant lag time. So it's not as quick as you think. It takes a while for your mind to catch up to that next place. And so let's look at some of the research on multitasking. First of all, children perform worse on homework when there's a screen nearby. And one study, they asked students to study with their phone next to them for 30 minutes. Then after, and the researchers, they tracked their eyes to see where they were looking. And then they, after this 30 minutes, they asked the students, how many times did they look at their phone? And on average, the students said about 15 times, which isn't that many. Do you know how many times they actually looked at their phone over that 30 minutes? 120 times. So kids aren't even aware of it, and that their focus is being drawn away from their schoolwork. But here's another interesting thing. The median length of time that they either looked at their computer or their book or their phone was 2 to 6 seconds. Now think about what it takes to really learn a piece of information. Can you really learn a piece of information in 2 to 6 seconds? No. So every time the focus is shifted away from the book or the computer that the kids are studying on, they're losing their focus and they're not processing that information. Also, other researchers found that the ability to stay on task was predictive of grades. So kids who, while they're doing homework, multitasked, if their total number of hours was high in it being immersed in technology, and also in checking their Facebook page once every 15 minutes, kids who did these things got worse grades. Also, 73% of college students can't study without their phones or music or something like that. And here's a little side note. I don't know if this has been happening in Chile, but in the US, a lot of teachers and professors are forcing kids to take notes in class with pencil and paper. Because what research has shown is that they process the information much more deeply when they're writing it by hand. The physical act of writing out the notes increases retention and learning compared to just typing. And also what tends to happen is when students type, they tend to just write down and repeat what the teacher or professor is saying. Whereas with a pencil and paper, students are more discriminating. They write down highlights. And so they're learning, they're structuring their notes in a much more productive way. Whoops, let's see. So you want to teach your children to single task. And that is to say, stay focused on one thing for an extended period of time. So if you think about anything that you might do in your career, whether it's a business meeting or running a budget at a company or a surgeon, all these things take the ability to focus for extended time. And the focus is a skill that the only way to develop that skill of focusing is through practice, through repetition. And kids these days are not getting that kind of repetition that we did, because we would be in our rooms and there'd be nothing else to do except maybe read another book or something, or read a magazine. But the distractions weren't so ever present or constant. So with your children, if they're older, because if they're younger, you can just force them to put away their phones and so on. But as they get older, you need to convince them. You need to get buy-in of this value of single tasking. And you can talk about some of the research, and there's a ton of it online for you to draw from. Create a quiet space and put away the media. Having them study in their rooms with the door open a bit, it's fine, but being in a busy space in the middle of the house is really distracting. And then make them put away their media, because if their phones are there, even if they're not on their phones, and chances are, like all kids, it's going to be pinging, vibrating, chirping, tweeting constantly. And again, like I talked about in the previous research, every time they hear that sound, their attention goes over there. And also, research has found that the phones don't even have to make any noises. Just the anticipation of them making noises directs focus away, and that disrupts learning. Help them get comfortable, but not too comfortable and organized. Kids, my daughters love studying in bed. Why? Because it's comfortable. But the problem is, in bed, there are other things you'd rather do, like lie down and just hang out. So have them ideally be at a desk in a comfortable chair where they're comfortable, but not too comfortable. And then help them get organized. Have a space that's not cluttered, because clutter is distraction. Help them lay out their books in a certain way so they can be structured in their study. It would be unfair for you to ask your kids to just study for 3 hours straight with no breaks. That's going to hurt learning as well. Plus, we also want to accept the reality that your children are involved in social media and in gaming, and so they need breaks. So what you can do is say, okay, you need to study for the next 2 hours. So you study for 25 minutes and you get a 5-minute break to do whatever they want, be on their phones, what have you, catch up with their friends, what have you. Those breaks are very important because it respects the fact that they need those breaks to give their mind a rest and reconnect when they're ready to re-engage in their homework. use bribery at first if necessary. Now, this has been an interesting topic because you wouldn't think that bribing your kids would be a very good thing. So if you're able to, over the next week, study without your phone in your room, then I will get you something reasonable. And because you probably heard about the research on external motivation, and external motivation actually hurts internal motivation. But bribery, the purpose of bribery is to initiate a new behavior. And kids might not have the incentive to try something new, like studying at a desk in a comfortable chair without their phones. So if you offer them some incentive, then they try it. And hopefully they find that they'll go, oh my gosh, I couldn't believe how efficient I was. And I got a lot done. And I did really well in the exam the next day. And so then it becomes reinforcing. But it does take time, especially if your kids haven't single tasked, if they've had their phones with them all the time and they're easily distracted, that they're going to constantly want to go back to that. But you need to stay committed. And this is where it gets tiring, because you have to stay vigilant. You have to check on them and make sure that they're doing the right thing. And then you have to be patient, because they're going to always want to slip back to their old ways. But as I just touched on, once they do this more, then hopefully they will see the benefits. They're more efficient. So in fact, if they're able to get more done in a shorter time, which means they'll have more time to do other things like be on their social media or watch movies or whatever it might be. Plus, they'll get better grades because they'll be more focused. Their study time will be more productive. They'll learn more. And so they'll be able to do better on exams and tests. Unintended consequences of multitasking, another cartoon. Evidently, studying isn't one of the tasks you perform when you're multitasking, as the mom looks at the report card and it's obviously not very good. Hopefully that'll give you a chuckle. Last area is decision-making. Decision-making may be the most important skill that young people can develop to be successful, happy, and effective adults. So when I speak to children in person on decision-making and use of technology, I ask them, how many of you ever made a bad decision? And they all raise their hand very enthusiastically. Then I say, why do you make bad decisions? And these are the most common answers. They think it'll be fun. And it's interesting because then I always ask, well, after you did it, was it worth it? Was it fun? They go, no, it wasn't really as fun as I thought it was going to be. They don't stop to think. And you probably heard about I'll talk about this in a minute. You probably heard about the prefrontal cortex, this part of the brain that's involved with a thing called executive functioning. And the research has shown that it takes till people are in their early 20s until their executive functioning, their prefrontal cortex fully develops. So kids are behind the 8 ball. Hopefully you know that metaphor. They're in a bad position for making decisions simply because of their brain development. So a lot of times they just won't think. They'll just think, oh, this looks fun, let's do it. Peer pressure. So a lot of times kids make bad decisions because everybody else is making bad decisions. Boredom. This is another big one. Kids like stimulation. So if they're bored, they're going to look for ways to stimulate themselves. And very often, the most stimulating things are things that are bad. And that can be very extreme, like drugs and alcohol, or it could be maybe a little less extreme, like eating a bunch of candy and sugar. This ties in with don't stop to think, but where they don't consider the consequences. So they don't think like, oh, what could happen if I do this? And here's a kicker. Get back at parents. This is one that the kids tell me constantly. Sometimes they make a bad decision just because they're mad at their parents and they want to get back at them. And that's obviously not very healthy. So let me introduce you a little more deeply to executive functioning. And this again is what your prefrontal cortex does. And it's involved with thinking, with weighing risks and rewards, with future consequences versus immediate consequences. It's involved in, like I say here, regulating, controlling, and managing your behavior. It's involved in considering different options when given a situation where you could do different things. And ultimately, it determines the decisions that are made that results in certain kinds of behavior. Whether it's, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not a healthy thing. Or, oh, that sounds really fun, so I'm going to do it. Decision-making has changed a lot since we were children. So decision-making in the analog world there used to be time to avoid bad decisions. So let's use an example. Let's say you were a teenager and your boyfriend, girlfriend broke up with you and you're heartbroken, you're angry, you're sad. So you write a letter and you say a lot of mean things about him or her. And you tell them how this was a big mistake and you're a horrible person. And then you put it in an envelope and you address it and you put it in the mailbox. And then you settle down, you calm down a little and you reflect on the situation and go, you know what? I'm really sad my girlfriend, boyfriend broke up with me, but they're not bad people. And so they start to reflect on the situation and decide whether what they did was wrong. Then they consider the consequences. So if my ex-boyfriend and girlfriend gets this letter, they're going to show it to all our friends, and everybody's going to hate me. And then they change their mind, and then they go back and get the letter out of the mailbox. And in doing so, they avoid embarrassment, disgrace, or in some cases, criminal charges. And that's a little bit of a joke. Also, the blast area is quite small with bad decisions in the analog world. The audience was basically immediate family and friends, maybe people at school. It wasn't that large of an area. The damage was relatively short-lived. And so if you did something, made a bad decision with your family or friends, at some point they'll forgive you and forget you. So it's not going to last that long. And the impact ultimately, unless it's a really, really bad decision, and most kids don't make really, really bad decisions, the impact is usually pretty minimal. As the saying goes, oh, how times have changed. Decision-making in the real world, in the digital world. Technology, such as social media, causes us to make knee-jerk reactions. And making decisions when you're highly emotional is not a good thing. So social media encourages acting on base impulses, emotions, and needs for attention. So on social media, how can I get a lot of likes? Well, I'm going to do something really stupid. I want to be accepted, so I'm always going to be happy. And anger, interestingly enough, research has shown this, and this is tied in with a lot of the political upheaval that's happening in our world, that the angry emoji in Facebook was the most clicked. Because when we're angry, we want to take action, we want to express our anger, and clicking that anger button it gives us an outlet for that. Clearly, if everything is so immediate, like type click, that discourages thinking and deliberation. Also, if you watch reality TV or on social media, like TikTok, most of the things that are on there that are popular are stupid. They're inane, they're trivial, or even they're harmful. And so if everybody in social media, if I want to be a social influencer, I need to do stupid things. Clearly not good decisions. It's also quicker and easier. You have your phone here. You don't have to write out the letter. You don't have to put it in the envelope. You don't have to address it and put a stamp on it. Just type it and click send. And of course, you're caught more easily because once something's on the internet, it never goes away. And now you might have heard how a lot of companies who are hiring young people go on their social media and see what they're putting on there to decide whether they should hire them. So if they put, if somebody applies for a job and has put some really offensive things on their social media, the employer is going to think maybe this is not the right person for us. The blast area is large. The audience, it's almost infinite. The web. Its presence, like I said, once something's out there, it is extremely difficult to get it removed. And the impact, well, I'm sure like me, you've heard stories about people's lives were ruined because they posted things on the internet that were offensive or harmful or damaging. Examples, we all know inappropriate texts, sexting, emails, voicemails, photos, videos, even Snapchat, where in theory the message is supposed to go away. It can stay forever because people take a screenshot of it. And of course, cyberbullying, which is really painful. There's always been bullying, but it's always been very localized because you used to have to bully to somebody right in front of you. And you also had to look them in the eye. But now you can cyberbully and not have to look them in the eye. You don't have to look at the pain in their face, the harm you're causing. It's so much easier. So teach your children to be good decision makers. How to do that? First of all, yes, let them make bad decisions. You want your kids to make bad decisions, not decisions that are so harmful that they're lasting and truly destructive. But part of learning to make good decisions is to make bad ones and go, oh, that was a bad decision. Maybe I won't do that again. Then coach them on how to make good decisions. Decision making can be a process of steps you go through. So one of the most important things to do with kids when it comes to decision making is just teach them to just stop. When they're about to do something bad, do something stupid, if they can learn to just stop for 5 seconds, they can engage their prefrontal cortex, their executive functioning, and maybe they're going to stop. That's a really hard thing to do, but it can save them. And then ask them some key questions. Why am I doing this? And is it a good reason? What are the consequences? Am I going to get in big trouble? Is it in my best interest? This is a question that's I think in many ways so important, because you want your kids to be able to make deliberate choices about the direction they go in their lives. So if they can ask, is doing this, whether it's drinking or participating in cyberbullying or sending inappropriate photos, if they can just stop and ask themselves, is this in my best interest? If they can engage their executive functioning, the chances are they're less likely to do it. And this last question is also important because it gets at morals. So ultimately, your kids are gonna go out the front door and go out into the world. And they need to have their own internal moral compass to decide whether they should make certain decisions. So if they can answer this question, is this the right moral thing to do? Then that connection of their behavior, their decisions with their values, with their morals, that connection can really help in making good decisions. And so after they make bad decisions, which again, like I said, we want them to make bad decisions, is to learn lessons from them. Because as the saying goes, those who don't learn from history are bound to repeat it. Very last thing, and I realized I might have said at the beginning 3 areas. Well, this is 4 areas. Relationships in a media-fueled world. So there was a study done a few years ago where they asked college students to totally disconnect from their technology for a day, for 24 hours. First of all, about 40% couldn't. But the ones who did responded very positively. And this is what one person said. I've lived with the same people for 3 years now. They're my best friends. And I think that this is one of the best days we've spent together. As I was able to really see them without any distractions. And we were able to revert to simple pleasures. So let's talk about social media with relationships. There are a lot of really great things about social media. First, it's a way to get acquainted, to meet, and to maintain relationships. It's also great for long distance relationships, especially with grandparents or siblings or parents who are far away. Online communities based upon shared ideas, values, and interests, whether it's sports or hobbies or whatever. It's a great way to connect and be a part of a community. As we've seen politically, it's a great way to foment causes and movements because everybody can communicate. Also in the business world, to spur creativity and innovation by using social media and technology to think about new ways of looking at the world. And then again, in the business world, to foster productivity and efficiency. And I think COVID, as sad as it was, it showed a lot of people that we could be highly productive and efficient while not having to spend time to go into the office. But then there's the bad. The first one involves the quantification of friends. So it used to be that friend, first of all, was the word friend was a noun. I have a friend or I have a few friends. Now it's a verb, to friend. I want to friend somebody. I want them to friend me. And friendship has become twisted, this idea of friendship, where it used to be about quality. So I've got 3 really good friends, but now it's about how many friends, how many likes, how many clicks, how many thumbs up you get. And that's how many friends you have. And that's simply not the case. That's so shallow. Social media also is missing information. So when you let relationships be mediated by a screen, you're missing direct eye contact. You're missing pheromones, sense. You're missing body language, tone of voice, certainly when it comes to texting. So these are essential components to building relationships. It's not just words on a screen texting. It's certainly, as I talked about, it's easier to distort the self. So it's easy on social media to say I'm 6 feet tall, but then what means you have to go meet this person and they see you're only 5'8". So that discrepancy, that difference can be a problem. The shallowness of communications. Now, with all due respect to haiku, you can only communicate so much information in 140 characters. Now it might be up to 220, I forget. So social media doesn't really allow for true depth of communication in building a relationship. Also, it fulfills needs for friendship, affiliation, and entertainment without full engagement. What I mean by that is, like, you can have a friendship online, but as soon as it ends, you can just click delete or end. And there's an expression, ghosting, which involves, you go out on a date with somebody and then you never hear from them again. And it's easy to do with social media. Also, as we well know, disinformation, Facebook, Twitter have been used horribly, certainly in the US, and I'm going to guess in Chile as well, to spread information that's simply not true. For example, like COVID vaccines. And then, as I talked about earlier, just opportunity costs. Time spent on social media, engaged in a screen, involved in technology, is time not spent doing other healthier things. After all our online chats, it's great to finally meet you in person. Same here, as they're on this, as they're at a table directly in front of each other. I want to talk a little briefly about family, and then we'll wrap things up, and family relationships. So some research has found that working parents, when they arriving home, are totally ignored by wired children 50% of the time. That's to say, when kids are in front of their technology, they don't even acknowledge their parents' existence when they walk in the door. Research has also shown that family time is hurt by social media. And the example is at dinner, when everybody's on their phones. They're not engaging in, they're not connecting in the non-technological sense when they're on their social media. Also, children who use a lot of social media feel less supported by their parents. And this is almost an obvious thing, because if they're in front of a screen, they're not talking to, they're not connecting with, they're not communicating with their parents. And this is something to really look in the mirror about, that parents are often as immersed in media as their children. So their children might want to talk or go outside and play with their parents, but the parents are too busy on their phones. So what can you do? I talked about this earlier. Be a role model for media and relationships. Stay connected to your children. I don't mean connected like you're also you're not following them on Facebook. I don't mean that. I mean, you're in front of them, you're talking to them, you're looking them in the eye, you're hugging them, you're doing activities with them, you're reading with them. And then, of course, again, talk to your children about media messages, about relationships, how too much technology, too much social media actually hurts family relationships. And then, most importantly, disconnect. Have some time during the week when phones, tablets, computers are not allowed. Dinner. Oh my gosh, people. Dinner is a time, it should be sacred, and it's so powerful for building relationships. And it's a time, as kids get older, it's almost the only time parents see their kids. So make a rule: no technology during dinner, no technology during homework. Having a day a week, maybe Sundays or Saturdays, or part of those days where there's no technology. It's hard, but it's really healthy to truly connect with them. So is this the future of families? Dear Andy, how have you been? Your mother and I are fine. We miss you. Please sign off your computer and come downstairs for something to eat. Love, Dad. Instead of walking upstairs and going to the room and saying, hey, it's time for dinner. How you doing? So let me introduce you to wrap up Kids 3.0. First of all, Kids 3.0 are value-driven. I wrote another book about this, about the importance of values in raising children. Values are so important because they are the road signs to our lives. What we value, what we prioritize, what's important to us, dictates what we do, how we spend our time, how we spend our money. So Kids 3.0 are guided by their deepest convictions. Second, they're mature. They act in ways that are healthy and appropriate. In a technological social media world where stupidity, where immaturity, where childishness is rewarded. They have healthy relationships with media. They see media technology as tools. They see it as the exception and not the rule. So they use it, but it doesn't dominate their lives. And they're not just tech savvy, they're tech skilled. And so that doesn't mean they can't use social media. It doesn't mean they can't do games on there. It doesn't mean that they can't be entertained by media, but they choose to use the technology. They're not being forced, controlled by technology to use it. They're caring. It's very difficult to be empathetic and compassionate through a screen. And that's why it's so easy, why there's so much meanness in the world, because it's easy to be mean. It's easy to be insulting without having to look somebody in the eye. So these kids 3.0, are more caring. They're also self-affirming. They're not dependent upon social media, on other people in terms of likes and clicks and thumbs up and friends to decide who they are, their self-identity, or how they feel about themselves. They can rely on themselves to validate themselves and their family and their friends who care about them. Finally, they're 21st century thinkers. At least here in the US, there's such pressure to get kids on the technology train with STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math early. But if you think about a Mark Zuckerberg or a Bill Gates or Elon Musk, they're not thought leaders because they knew how to code. They're thought leaders because they were independent, creative, expansive, and agile thinkers. And as much as we like to think technology is wonderful in many ways, it's a box. It's a beautiful, entertaining box, but it's still a box. And when you're in a box, you're limited by what you can see, what you can think, and what you can create. Whereas if you knock that box down, you put away the technology, the world, you can see the world. And from all these different things that the world has to offer, you can have kids who again think independently, creatively, expansively, and agilely. So this ability to use technology in a healthy way and have healthy relationships with media is an incredible gift you can give your kids, and maybe certainly one of the top 3 of any gifts you can give them. So the gift is this: to raise them to be successful, happy, and connected people, ready to succeed in this media fuel world. And you know what? Kids don't always express their gratitude, their appreciation for you, but at some point when they grow up, they'll turn to you and say, Dad, Mom, thank you for fighting the fight with me against technology. So before I remove stop sharing the PowerPoint, and then we can open up for questions and answers, a couple of things. First of all, you can follow me in a variety of different ways from my website. Yes, I am on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, but only for work. My kids only use, my older daughter only uses Snapchat, nothing else. My younger daughter doesn't have any social media. If you go to my blog, for my homepage, I have both blogs for technology and parenting. And if you're interested, you can find my book online, Raising Generation Tech. In any case, before I open it up for thanks again, contact information. If you have an interest in asking me questions or following up, feel free to drop me an email. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and we can turn it over to, I think, Monica, who's the moderator, and we can open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Thank you very much for all of those interesting things you said. There's one question that it isn't directly related to what you were saying, but basically the point is, when you have difficulties, when you have problems, how can you talk about them in a positive way and turning them around into a growing situation, a developing situation? Yeah.
So that really is about the tone of the message that you're sending across. So the problem can be, oh my gosh, you did this is all bad, really negative. Mm-hmm. And if the messages you're sending about an experience were all negative, and it might be related to making a bad decision, then your kid's gonna focus on the negativity, and they're gonna get defensive because they're gonna feel attacked. So you want to be very calm. That's so unbelievably important as parents, to be as calm as you can. And that, as you all know, that can be really hard when your kid does something not very good. But it's really important that very often the reason why kids do stupid things is because they're out of control. And so if they're out of control and we're out of control, that's a scary world to be in, because kids, especially young ones, they rely on us to be calm, to be in control of our world, because that means they're less scared. So first of all, in talking to your kids, be as calm as you can. And if you're not ready to be calm, don't talk to them about it yet. Wait till you've calmed down. Second of all, to then be very honest and open about what they did wrong. But then as soon as they communicate that it's okay, that they understand, then focus on what they can do about it, because you can't change the past. So okay, you made a pretty big mistake here. You made a poor decision. Okay, so how about we talk about what you can do to not do it again and make a better decision? And then you can focus on them, talk to them about maybe the specific situation they were in. Maybe they were with peers and they went along with doing the stupid thing, or you can focus on that idea that I mentioned about coaching their decision making. So next time you're in that situation, what can you do? And that's where you can ask the questions. Is this the right thing to do? Is this in my best interest? What are the consequences? That's what I have.
Yeah, perfect. Great. Thank you. Now, there's another question here, and it says, how can you manage homeworks without screens? If by middle school, all the contents on the web and the kids, well, they need the screens for studying.
Right. I have no problem with screens if they're used as a tool. And the fact is, most homework these days, most schoolwork is on a screen. And that's fine. It's more because, again, I believe technology can be a wonderful tool. And in this case, with homework and collaborating on projects, a screen is really valuable. But it's when it's used for other things, like, again, social media, gaming, that's a distraction from that. So fine, in their room, at their desk, in their comfortable chair, on their computer or their laptop, that's fine. But where's the phone? Where's the tablet? Where's the music? Hopefully not there in the room. Oh, I can't hear you, Monica.
I'm sorry.
I heard a dog barking. Oh, now again, you're muted again.
No, yeah, I know.
Oops.
Now I am. Sorry,
Okay.
my dogs are barking, and one just jumped here and made a mess with all the screen and everything. So please, sorry.
It's okay.
Now, okay, questions then. What filters do you recommend to have for the screenings, for the computers, internet, and all this? And how much time should they be exposed to screens, really?
Yeah. Well, the recommendations are generally kids shouldn't be in front of screens until they're at least 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then slow introduction. I mean, my kids didn't see a movie until they were 8 years old, and you know, we're a little extreme on that, but they don't need screens. That's about expediency. Your kid's bored, your kid's cranky, give them a phone, let them play a game, let them watch YouTube or whatever. It's not in their best interest, for sure. And then the amount of time, you know, I have a hard time with that because it depends upon the family. But certainly screen time, entertainment screen time should be the last thing they do. It should be earned. So they finish their homework, they get their exercise, they clean their room, then they can be in front of their screen for, I don't know, when they're young, you know, 5-10 minutes, then expand from there. But again, think of that comparison of 9 hours a day. It's inconceivable almost. And so, but it certainly should be, you know, an hour on weekends, a couple of hours, as long as they do the other things that are necessary and healthy in their lives.
Now, what do you think? Is it ethical to read their messages, the message that they type, they use with the friends or whatever? Should you be reading them?
Wait, I didn't quite understand the question.
What they're saying is, you as a parent, do you think it's something, is it ethical? Is it, I don't know, something appropriate to do?
Yeah. Should you read their social media, read their text messages?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm going through this with my own children, and they said you should not. And what we've decided is that we're going to trust them until they break their trust. Now, our girls have never, they're just like good kids. They've never done anything really stupid yet, and that bothers me a little. But I kind of wish they would a little bit. But we've agreed that, and they both demonstrated good judgment in their lives outside of technology, and so they've earned our trust. And we told them that as long as you continue to earn our trust, we will not look at your messages and postings and so on. But if they've demonstrated poor decision making in the past, or they violated your trust, I think it's totally appropriate.
Perfect. Now, related to that, because it's really important, the communication that you have with the children, then at what age do you think it's okay to give them the phone, the mobile?
Yeah, this is tough because it's not only a developmental, like what's healthy, but also what's practical. Yeah. So if your kids are taking the bus to school, or they're at friends, it's really a lot easier to be able to just pick up the phone and reach them. And so depending on where you live and what your situation is, you have to consider the reality of just, it's nice being able to communicate with your kids. Plus, from a safety perspective, I mean, you know, when I was a kid, we'd leave the house on a weekend, Saturday morning, and not come back till nighttime, and our parents didn't even think twice about it. But these days, we're so afraid that something's going to happen to our kids, even though we've never been in a safer time. And why do we now believe it's so dangerous? Because on the local news, the social media, you hear about kidnappings and all these other kind of things, even though it's still really safe, at least where we are. And so you have to address the practical side, but also, what is your family value? So we didn't give our kids phones until they were in 8th grade, and all their friends had phones. And they said, you're going to turn us into freaks, and our friends aren't going to like us, and I'm feeling left out. And they'll try all these little games on us, but ultimately we decided that this was really important, and where they earn it, and they first got a phone, and then they get texting, and then they get social media, but not all social media. Instagram, poison, the worst. The research has shown it is the worst piece of social media. If you look at the feed in Instagram, what did I say? Instagram, yeah, that it's all mostly beautiful, slim, made up, sexy girls. Horrible message for girls, and for boys too, for that matter. And so you really should, part of the decision, aside from the practical aspects, is doing what's consistent with your values. And you're going to get resistance, but that's where the expediency comes in. Not being expedient. You can nag me all you want, but you're not getting the darn phone until you're in 8th grade. And there's a movement here. I don't know if they have this in Chile, but it's called Wait Until 8th. And it's schools sign on, families, community sign on, and where you basically agree, like classes. So let's say 7th grade, everybody's got a phone except your kid. That's hard. But if everybody in the classes agreed, all the parents have agreed, we're not getting our kids' phones until 8th grade, much easier, because the culture of the class is no phones.
Yeah, and because of that, there's another question here. It's interesting. We have now several questions, but this one is, what happens, because how can you manage really when you teach your son or daughter not to use screens, but they go and visit other houses and they're exposed to their friends' cell phones or other type of screens or phones or whatever? What can you do there? Yeah,
great question. First, ideally, if you can surround your kids with like-minded families. And so do they have Waldorf schools in Chile?
Yeah.
Okay. So my kids were in Waldorf. And part of there is very slow tech, not no tech, but it's very slow tech. And so my kids' classmates all didn't have technology, and so we could trust that when they went over their friend's house, they weren't going to be exposed to it. But as they've gotten older, of course, they go to friends' houses, and some of the kids are just constantly just on their phones. And my kids hate it because it's horrible to see a bunch of kids together and they're not talking to each other. They're on their phones. And so in an ideal world, you surround them with friends and other families that have similar practices. But at the same time, you can't always do that. And in which case then they come and say, like, oh gosh, they have video games or they have phones. And I go, that's fine. And I might make a joke out of it and say, well, if you want them to adopt you, then that's fine. But as long as you're in our family, this is what we value. This is what we believe. This is the way it's going to be.
Yeah. Now, what happens? I'll ask you at the end, because there's a question there of how can schools help with this. But before that, if the child is really immersed in all this, it's kind of an addiction, as you had said before. What's the best, mixing different questions about this, but what's the best approach with that? What can you do? Do you consult a psychologist, a professional, something like that? And how can you as a parent deal with the situation?
Right. Yeah. Like I said earlier with this expression, the train has left the station. I don't know, hopefully that translates okay. And you're not going to be able to just easily say no technology. Or so if the kids are older, then, well, first of all, if your kids get to that place, you're to blame. So it's your fault because you allowed it. And that's a little harsh, but that's the reality. You gave them the phone, you let them have unrestricted time. Now they're addicted. So talk to them and educate, again, like I said earlier, educate them about the impact, talk to them about how it can hurt them, and then start to set limits. And maybe not cut it, not cold turkey. Does cold turkey translate? But cut back. Okay, you can have 2 hours and then an hour. And you have to retrain them. You have to wean them off the drug of technology. And that's really hard. I mean, I have huge empathy for parents who try that, because it's an uphill battle. Because your kids, it's like any kind of drug. Getting your kids off cocaine or alcohol or gambling, it's unbelievably hard. And look, technology is not quite as bad as those things, but it has its harm. So it takes a tremendous amount of commitment and determination to pull it back.
Yeah. Yes. Now, how can schools help us parents with these issues?
Yeah. So clearly, kids are going to use technology at school, but I think schools should have a tech policy, such as no phones in the classroom. I know some schools where they'll have shoe hangers, where they have a bunch of shoes in rows, and when they walk into school, they put their phone in it and they don't see it for the rest of the day. Or if a kid is caught with the phone, then it gets taken away for a day. And so I think schools can have a huge impact, because those are 8 hours during the day that can be used to help kids wean themselves off of technology. Or it can be in class like this, or during lunch like this. And I think the schools who are very clear set very clear limits, and they're much better able to enforce, because kids are going to push back against their parents. They're not going to quite push back against teachers in the same way.
Now, related to that, there's another question here, and it says, how wrong is it to have a big screen in the classroom and use YouTube? Would that give a bad impact on the kids?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I think that technology is a part of education. I think you have to be careful, though, and I think that at least here in the U.S., where a lot of public schools are struggling, that educators see it as the solution of the day. But technology is not a solution. The solution is well-paid, well-trained, experienced teachers. Now, technology can be a wonderful tool, because like on YouTube, maybe you don't have the resources to do a physics experiment, but you can go on YouTube and find the experiment and watch it. So again, it's just like a kid using a computer or a screen for their homework, using a big screen TV and YouTube for educational purposes. Absolutely, all for it.
Perfect. Jim, the last thing, they want your information again.
Yes.
If they want to contact you, could you show again in the screen
Yes.
your contact information, please?
Yep.
And although this is something we would, I don't know, spend the night talking, I think it's a bit late. So here we are. Everyone can have the information. And something that Daniel didn't say at the beginning, we're going to send the link afterwards. So if someone wants to check again, take a look at the talk or have the information,
yeah,
they'll have the link.
Yes.
No, Daniel?
Yes, and just again to wrap up.
Siempre se me queda algo, Mónica.
I always forget something, Monica. We can't cover everything, I know. And that's good because it shows that basically we are in this learning process and development. And of course, the training and this talk, Jim's talk, helped us in developing competencies and new skills to see from a different perspective the capabilities that we may have to regulate and to learn in this process about our children. And well, this way, dear Jim, thank you very much. And thank you, Monica, also, who was joining us during the questions, moderating. John had to leave, but he wanted to greet you again, and to all the parents, all the mothers from the Grange who we care a lot for, and we know that these activities from the Lincoln School that are also very actively participating, and all the schools that today have gathered to watch Jim, to listen to him, to learn with him, and to invite you, because this is a continuum that stops this year, but we hope to continue next year to have this quality of guests and keep growing together as parents. And the most important thing, to thinking in a better future for our children with new competencies and skills that let us generate that link, that relationship that Jim was talking about. Jim.
It was a pleasure to have you here, even though we were not present.
Yeah.
Hopefully next time is going to be in Chile, where you guys are.
Well, I just want to thank you, Daniel, for all your great efforts in getting this organized. I know it took a lot of time and energy. And Monica, thank you for moderating. And thank everyone for taking the time out of your day, your evening, to allow me to share my thoughts and my passion. So all my best to you. Happy holidays. And again, feel free to reach out if I can help in any way. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me.
Thank you for that. And I would like to read the final message, because here a mom said, thank you for the presentation. I got my kids watching with me because they would listen, believe you, more than what they would to me. And we enjoy and appreciate the presentation. So thank you very much. I think that's a good message to kind of close everything, you know?
Very good. All right. Take care and be well, all of you. Bye-bye.
As Jim said, it's easier to be a good parent for others.
For sure. Now I have to get back to being a good parent of my own. Yeah. All right. Take care. Be well.
Bye. Thank you.
Cariño, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And Tarek and Lillian, thank you for your wonderful translation.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
It was a great talk. Very interesting.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye.